a dot here in the East. Grab your coffee or some orange juice, sit back, and let's talk about this trial we're watching out of Florida. Florida versus Patrick Warren. It's a double murder trial. I'm Christy Paul. So glad to have you company this morning. We're in the middle of the defense's case right now, if you're just joining us. Attorneys have called psychologist Linda Martin to the stand. Now, she started counseling the defendant, Patrick Warren, and his wife, Kelly, back in 2005. And just a few days before Patrick shot Kelly and the man he thought she was sleeping with, Martin asked him to start taking antidepressants. So let's watch her testimony here.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Please have a seat, ma'am.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Doctor, please state your full name and spell your last name.
Linda Elizabeth Martin, M-A-R-T-I-N.
Thank you, ma'am. Sir?
Dr. Martin, what is your profession?
I'm a psychologist.
And how long have you been a psychologist?
I worked for the Brevard County court system for 10 years, from 75 to 85, got licensed in psychology in 87, licensed in marriage and family in 86.
Okay. And just briefly, could you tell us what your training was to become a licensed psychologist?
5 years of graduate school, internship, dissertation, supervision after the license, both in marriage and family and in psychology.
Okay. And are you licensed by the state of Florida in any way?
Yes,
And
two
what
licenses.
type of a license is that?
Marriage and family therapy and psychology.
Are you licensed in any other states?
No.
Are you board certified or anything like that in any way?
There's no board certification as much as it's just a license to practice.
Okay. Have you ever testified in court before?
I don't think so unless it was in juvenile court.
Well, you mentioned that you worked for the Brevard County.
Right, I did psychological evaluations of juveniles.
Okay. And Doctor, do you know Mr. Patrick Warren?
Yes.
Do you see him here in the courtroom?
Yes.
Could you just quickly point him out and describe what he's wearing?
Gray jacket, purple shirt.
Okay. And were you involved in any psychological counseling with Mr. Warren in the year 2008?
Yes.
And when did that begin in 2008?
I think it was January 2nd.
Okay. If you could speak up just a little bit.
January 2nd.
Okay. And how long did that go on in 2008?
I counted up. I saw him 10 times, and he made 6 phone calls.
And you are aware of the fact that ultimately his wife and another person were killed?
Yes.
And did any contact you had with Mr. Warren, did it continue after that moment, or did it end then?
It ended.
Are you generally familiar with the date or when that homicide occurred?
I'd have to look at my. No, I think it was like April 2nd. I'm not sure. I'd have to look
Early
at
April?
Real early April.
Okay. Had you had any contact with Mr. Warren, say, within a week of that incident?
He called March 28th. I had given him a letter for medical leave from Sears and required that he get some antidepressants as well as continuing counseling if he wanted that. And he called on the 28th to say he had been to his primary care physician's office and they wanted back pay he or his wife owed and a copay that he didn't have, and he left without the antidepressant prescription.
So he informed you he was unable to obtain the antidepressant medication?
Right.
And explained to you why?
Financial, really.
Okay. Let me show you what has been marked as Defense Exhibit L. And let me ask you if you recognize that.
Yes.
What is that?
That's a leave medical certification form that was sent to Sears so that he could have some time off work.
And is that your writing on it and your
Yes.
signature on those 2 pages?
Yes, it is.
And what does that include?
It includes a diagnosis and recommendations.
And what was your your medical diagnosis, psychological diagnosis of Mr. Warren as of the date? Well, first of all, what's the date of that document?
March 31st.
2008? Yes?
2008, yes.
Okay. And what was your diagnosis of Mr. Warren on that date?
Major depressive disorder.
And what does that mean?
I didn't hear that.
Major depressive disorder.
And what does that mean?
Well, he was severely depressed.
And what are some of the symptoms of that?
I mean, and apparently, you know, having trouble at work, getting along with people, but he would be crying in session, sometimes sobbing loudly, and he would call and be crying on the phone. He was obviously very distressed.
I'm sorry, doctor, we said crying in sessions. What was the other one?
Oh, sometimes, even on one occasion, loud sobbing in the office. And he would make phone calls and would be crying on the phone.
Phone calls to you?
Yes.
In addition to the face-to-face contacts
Yes.
in your office?
Yes.
Now, prior to January of 2008, had you had contact with Mr. Warren?
Yes.
And did that what did that contact in general involve?
A focus on marriage and parenting issues.
So you'd had contact with Mr. Warren prior to January of 2008?
Yes.
And then you've had contact from January through the end of March of 2008?
Yes.
Did you know, and did you have a chance to observe Mr. Warren both prior to January of 2008, any contact you had, and from 2008 forward?
Yes.
And did you have an opportunity to compare or contrast any observations you made about him between those two time frames?
Yes, he.
And what is that?
I'd never seen him cry before.
Prior to January 2008?
Right. And he and his wife were together and not separated. And they were separated from January on.
Okay. Any other personal observations of Mr. Warren that you made during that period of time?
Before and after. Well, he would be irritable and fussy and moody, but never violent.
Okay. Now,
I'm sorry, man. You said irritable?
Irritable and have fusses with his wife, but never violent. No history of violence there.
And that was prior to January of '08?
Right.
I thank you.
and is that prior to January or after January? That he was irritable and fussy?
Well, he was always irritable, and they were having arguments and marital difficulties. Okay. That had its ups and downs.
Criminal defense attorney Brian Claypool is with us right now. Brian, let's jump on that last statement she said, that she made about how he was always irritable and kind of fussy because they were going through marital counseling. They were having issues. Do you think she's able to make any headway for him?
Well, Christy, I think she is able to make headway for him because she's able to contrast pre-January 2008 and then from January 2008 until the time of the shooting. She clearly segregates the two and says, oh yeah, he had some problems before January 2008 dealing with family issues, and that actually shows that Warren cares about his family. He cares about his wife, cares about his kids. He wants to try to work on it. A lot of men out there, they won't even go into a counseling session. They won't try to deal with their problems. But here's a guy that really is doing it. So that's a point in his favor. But more importantly is from January 2008 up until the time of the shooting, you now have a guy who's crying, sobbing, and Dr. Martin says, I've never seen this guy do this before. And then she diagnoses him with a major depressive disorder, which tells the jury that his mental condition is more than just, hey, this guy's bummed out. It's more than that now. She's prescribed an antidepressant. It's now raising the level of his condition to a point where he needs medical intervention. That possibly supports a heat of passion argument.
Okay,
then.
And that's what I wanted to ask you, because I know that you've been an expert witness in cases where heat of passion has been the defense in that particular case. And I'm wondering, why is it a valid argument, and is it really applicable in this particular trial?
Well, I think it is a valid argument, and I think it is applicable to this trial for this reason. Heat of passion involves what's called like a sudden provocation. Something happens that causes you to do something uncontrollably that you normally otherwise wouldn't do. Now, this case is a little bit more unique because you have kind of a buildup to a point where Warren actually shoots and kills these two folks. Usually, in heat of passion, something happens, you're told about an affair, and then within, let's say, 30 minutes or so, you run to somebody's home and you shoot and kill them. Usually that's what happens with heat of passion. So this is a little bit different. So it is a bigger hurdle for the defense in this case because you have this time gap.
Yeah,
he's
got time to let it fester. He's got time to think about it.
That's exactly right, and I think that's a good point.
Can the defense get over that, Brian? Is there any way for the defense to get over that whole time frame?
Yes, I think the only chance the defense has to get over the time frame is to elicit sympathy from the jury about this alleged Missy and how far that Kelly and John Buick went to create this scam to torment Mr. Warren to a point where he just blows a gasket. In other words, you have to bring in the human component to this case. You have to hope that the jury decides that this was heat of passion, not so much based on the evidence, but based on human nature, because we all know that juries don't always decide cases based on the evidence. They allow emotion to come into this, and that's where the defense has to focus.
Well, and this is my question. In order to know what his mindset was, because that's what this is about, it's about his mindset, he would have to possibly get on the stand to really clarify that. Would you put him on the stand, and what could he possibly add that isn't being added already to this trial?
Well, based on what I saw from Dr. Martin's testimony, I would not recommend at this point putting Mr. Warren on the stand, because Dr. Martin presented very well. She's been a psychologist since the 1980s. She treated Mr. Warren before she diagnosed him with major depressive disorder, and she now has provided a window through which the jury can now see and look into the mind of Patrick Warren. And that really obviates the need now to put Patrick Warren on the stand, because she has now spoken to his mental health and the fact that he really was like a ticking time bomb, and then the bomb goes off. And she's provided that to the jury. Too much risk to put him on the stand now. She's already helped the case.
What about remorse? I don't know if I've heard anyone speak towards remorse and any remorse that he might have shown. If they cannot show remorse in him, big hurdle?
I think it is a big hurdle, and I think the comment by the emergency room technician or the driver of the ambulance, who made a comment that Mr. Warren made a derogatory comment about John Buick. That I think could be very powerful to a jury when they're back there deliberating. They might then feel angry at Warren and say, "Man, you just killed this guy, and you're calling him a little you know what?"
Yeah.
That doesn't bode well for Warren.
All righty. Hey, thank you so much, Brian Claypool. It's been so good to have you with us today. Sure, take good care. Now, as